On this episode of the Mamas con Ganas podcast, I'm interviewing Christine Clyne-Spraker, author of Unwinding Perfect and founder of co-foundHer. Welcome, Christine, to the Mamas con Ganas podcast.
Hi, Val. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. So, Mamacita, Christine, I met while we were doing a spiritual retreat last year. And it was a beautiful retreat where we got close to the women, and I found out at the end of the retreat that she had written this book called Unwinding Perfect. I read it, and I was like, okay, I have to interview Christine for the podcast. And not only is she somebody that's dear to me now, but is a woman that I really truly admire, and you'll see why when I share her story here. Christine, I think your story, one of the reasons that it spoke to me is because there's a lot of themes in your book that are themes that a lot of women can relate to. I would say one of the themes is this idea of needing to portray like this perfect life, right? I think a lot of um, women grow up thinking that their life needs to look a certain way, and if that they check all the boxes in that on that list, that everything will be perfect, right? And we sort of chase this idea of the perfection that we have in our head, and then sometimes when we don't see it fulfilling our feelings, right? When we see that we're checking all the boxes, but at the same time that all those boxes that are checking are not necessarily giving us the fulfillment that we yearn for in our hearts, there is a sort of disconnect. And we feel a sense of like, well, why am I not happy if I've checked all of these things off and they were the things that were on my list as to dos, as goals? Like, why am I not fulfilled? Why is my life not, why doesn't it feel like satisfying? And there was a part in the beginning of the book where you wrote, I was what some might consider living a very charmed life and at the top of my game. I had been married for almost 16 years, had two bright and kind children, lived in a beautiful home in an affluent Denver neighborhood, and was a co CEO of a healthcare technology company I had helped build from the ground up. So, like, you describe this like, you have a beautiful home, you have children, and you have a husband, and then this feeling of insatisfaction, right? Like this yearning for more. Can you tell us, like, from your perspective, why you think that so many of us like struggle with this, and why in particularly, like, how did you come to that realization? Because I think a lot of us live blindly, and we go about our lives without even consciously admitting to ourselves that we feel this way.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can say why I think other people do, but I can tell you why I lived that way. Um, and thank you for that great introduction, by the way. Yeah, so I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about feelings or emotions. And I had two very loving and kind parents. They loved us all so dearly, but we didn't talk about the hard stuff. We didn't have hard conversations. And my mom, she grew up the same way where you're just everything is good all the time. Everybody's happy and you show up for everybody else and you give and you give and you give and you become this people pleaser. And so for me, I that's what was modeled to me. And so that's how I learned what my value was by giving to others and meeting others' needs. It wasn't about what does Christine really want, even though I was successful and I chased, you know, it's not like somebody said I have to be this way, and I still chased things that made me happy. But when it came to the relationships, I was always trying to meet everybody else's needs first. And so by doing that, my sense of worth was how I showed up for everybody else. So that meant like you talk about the beginning of my book where I say I had like this perfect, marriage and this perfect house, and it's like this perfect life from the outside. But on the inside, because I didn't know how to have the hard conversations throughout my entire life to navigate the situations that would have maybe brought me more fulfillment. So, for example, my now ex-husband and I were very surface level. We had a lot of fun together. He's really funny. He's handsome. You know, he was very successful early on, and so from the outside, it was like this perfect guy. And we didn't have to have those hard conversations. And so, throughout our marriage, we didn't put in the work for us to be able to build the strong foundation as marriage gets harder, as kids come, as there's different challenges. And so that was kind of that from that perspective. And then I was thriving in my professional career, but it was at the sake of always what's next. What's the next, success as determined by the outside, by this Western civilization that we live in, where we value things and we value titles and we value, as a society, people's ranks and how much money they make and all of that. And so I kept achieving more and more and more, but inside I was so empty and I was so broken because all of these things that I thought I was doing that I was supposed to be doing, whether it was modeled from my mom or whether it was just what society was telling me I had to do, wasn't bringing me satisfaction internally. And so for me, I had to finally, I didn't even do it intentionally, but I started working with some spiritual teachers who helped me start to just have some basic awareness. I didn't know about core wounds. I didn't know I was wounded. I didn't know I had trauma in my childhood because I had desensitized myself so much to all of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I said, the book really is like a spiritual awakening book. What I sensed there was like a deep discomfort, and it's really cool that you actually had, I feel like, the courage and the audacity and the motivation to go seek answers. Because a lot of times people just live their life blindly without like seeking the answers. But you talk a lot about the spiritual teachers that you had that made you aware precisely of these things that you're talking about, like the core wounds, and they saw you see, they helped you see the patterns that were coming from your upbringing, right? That's why it's so important to seek help elsewhere, because sometimes we go about our lives without realizing, like, it's so much easier for somebody to see it from the outside, right, than us seeing what
Always.
patterns we've been repeating from our childhood. And it's so cool when we are actually able to break these patterns that don't serve our family lineage. um I think they're like the hard
It's so cool.
yeah, it's so cool because it's like the hardest thing to do. It's so easy to
Yeah.
emulate and to imitate the things that we've been taught, and to be made self-aware of those things, and then to start changing them. Because one thing is becoming aware of the patterns that we've acquired through our parents, and another thing is reprogramming all of those patterns
Hmm.
and like redoing all of the thought systems and breaking those belief systems that don't serve us and acquiring new belief systems, but doing it from the standpoint of um of empowerment and of doing it consciously, because we run on autopilot a lot of times. And just like you're saying, like when you talk about in the book of avoiding difficult conversations, it's just something that you were used to doing because it's what you saw in your family.
Hmm.
And we sometimes want to do those things so quickly, right? That's the other thing I got from your book, is that we're so desperate to change those things, and we sometimes need to give ourselves the grace to understand that these things it takes a while, and it takes
Yeah.
awareness, and so much work, so much shadow work, which is the other thing that you talk about in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much in there. I know. It's like my whole journey.
Yeah, like the shadow work. I mean, like those were the things that your spiritual teachers helped you to start to see. The other thing that really helped you, I saw, and I know that this is helpful. I need to do a little bit more of, is like the journaling. Like you were able to go back, and you were always journaling about your feelings. So at least you had a connection to what you were going through at the moment, even if you couldn't quite change the situation. Tell us a little bit about that aspect, like writing your thoughts down, how it kind of came full circle, how you were given exercises by your spiritual leaders, and how all of the writing became cathartic for your spiritual journey.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've always been a very STEM focused mind. I love science, I love math. I was really focused on those as a career. And somehow I also always enjoyed writing. So I don't know how those two go together, but from like a professional standpoint, it's always been more of the scientific and the, mathematical type. But from a young age, my mom gave me a journal when I was young. I still have it. I was like in third grade, and it was like, oh, I saw Billy and somebody hold hands. It was so cool. Like I started journaling at a really young age. And then when I was a senior in high school, I went through a really hard loss. I lost one of my best friends, and journaling, I had PTSD, I had severe anxiety, and journaling really helped me just get out of my body what was festering inside. And so I started writing. So I just maintained all these journals. And then I would go through phases of very intense journaling, and then I would stop for years. And so I've maintained all of them. I've kept all of them. So I really can go back and I have this record of my life, which has been kind of cool. I mean, I don't know, it's cool because I can go back and reference it. But for me, it is cathartic because it does help me get those words out of my head. Sometimes when I'm speaking, it's almost easier for me to articulate my thoughts writing than speaking, and I'm more comfortable writing. And it allowed me to, like you said, to go back and weave together some of these themes that I wasn't even aware of were themes at the time. Like some of my heartache and heartbreak and disappointment and how my marriage was, but I thought that that was just what a wife did. I thought you just kept it all together and nobody's life was really perfect, even if you presented it from the outside. Um, and so for me, it really just it became like a safe space to land. I think the other thing that I had a hard time with were close relationships. Not that I wasn't close with my mom and dad, but we just, because we didn't talk about the hard things, there was almost shame around those shadows. I mean, that's what a shadow is, right? We feel shameful about them and we're afraid to show them to the world because we're afraid we're not going to be loved. And so I didn't know how to be vulnerable with anybody. It was really difficult. And so it was almost like the journaling was my place where I could be vulnerable. And sometimes I'd be like, oh my gosh, did I really just put that in there? What if somebody reads it or whatever? So I really had to do the shadow work, like you mentioned, but also get to the point where I learned to love those things about me that I thought people would judge me about or not love me about. But the way that it was really twofold in the sense that I really stopped caring what people thought. It became more about, does this make me happy or does it not? And if it doesn't make me happy, then I'm not going to do it to please everybody else. That's something that I just totally removed. um, but then by also bringing light to those shadows, they kind of just go away. Like they just aren't even really shadows anymore because you're not so concerned about how it's going to present in the world. And the journaling was just a small part of that, but it did help me just focus those feelings and those emotions. And then, of course, there's meditation and there's other practices that I really started to build upon that helped.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we can see, because there were quite a few years that you were there in the relationship where you admit that you were not happy at all, but you were progressing in other areas. Like from the
Hmm.
reader's perspective, we're like, oh yeah, she's still stuck here in not being able to have a difficult conversations. But then in between, you were sprinkling in difficult conversations, right? Like I think it was like the first time that it was 2012 or something, the first time that you approached your husband and told him, I'm not happy. So that was like the first where you told him. And then maybe a couple years passed, and then you kind of approached the subject again. It took several times, but we see you unraveling and getting more and more comfortable with these difficult conversations that, like you say, are so important to have. And I want to say, like, from 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 my life's perspective, I couldn't agree more. It's like, it's almost like the conversations that are the most important to have are the difficult conversations.
Well, here's what I learned. If you're not having a difficult conversation, if you're not saying your truth, then you're lying to everybody else. And I had never looked at it that way. By not telling my ex-husband how I truly felt, I was lying to him. I was lying to my children. I was lying to my parents. I was lying to the world. And so I think a lot of times we think we're protecting other people by not saying our truth because we're worried we're going to hurt their feelings. I read this book and I talk about it in the book. I can't remember what it's called now, but something about don't kick a cow pie when it's hot or something. But it talks about the difference of being kind versus being nice. Being nice is like, oh, somebody shows up at your house and they kind of look like a hot mess, but you're like, oh, you look really nice because you don't want to hurt their feelings. But being kind would be, hey, your hair is a little crazy and this is going on. Can I help you with it? Even though it might hurt their feelings initially, you're showing up for them in a true way. And so I learned that in business. The way I learned to have these hard conversations was being this co-CEO and having this business that I had to have these hard conversations for our business to thrive. If I didn't, the business isn't going to thrive because the employees aren't thriving. And so I had to get very comfortable very quickly telling people that their work wasn't great, but learning to do it in a way that still showed love. Telling people that I had to fire them. I mean, that was really hard. That people weren't getting jobs. So you learn how to navigate these difficult conversations. And then I realized, oh wow, this is a skill set I need to use in my personal life as well. And because my ex and I had just never had those hard conversations. We were never vulnerable with each other. We were never fully open with each other. It was really hard and really scary to do. And with my parents, I've had to have hard conversations with them. Ultimately, I think everybody has grown from it, which has been really cool to see. I see my mom standing up for herself now. I see her saying no to things. My dad's more open than he's ever been before. I think my ex, I mean, he's doing things he's never done before. So it's it benefits everybody in the long run, but it is so scary and it's so hard, and you never want to hurt anybody, but it's not your job to worry about how they receive things. And once I learned that, I was like, okay, as long as it's with love and it's my truth, then it's okay for me to speak it.
Wow, I love that. And you know what's really cool too that we see from the outside is that your business, like, because as your, let's say, relationship and marriage was deteriorating, your business was like thriving. And I feel like you were learning all of these, let's say, skills or like the weaknesses that you had in your personal life, you were overcoming them in your business. Like you said,
Mm.
you were having difficult conversations at work. And as rose up in the corporate ladder and, ultimately became the CEO, like you were doing these things that you weren't doing in your personal life and you were learning how to do them. And it was almost like your job was like your teacher. And then the other one that I'm reminded of is that story that you say that you went on a trip to France and you were cycling and you came back to do a presentation and you had felt renewed and you sort of opened up in in this work presentation in a way that you never had before. It was a bit vulnerable, a bit personal, and you sensed that it had a great impact on the people that were there, and they gave you comments like, wow, this is really cool. And you were learning at that moment, wow, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's like you were learning
Mhm.
in the work setting. And then that later transpired into your personal life. So I thought that was really interesting too, because many times there's different teachers, I think, that come into our life and certain activities that we do that teach us about life and we don't even know it. We're so closed off. Like I know for myself, like one of my spiritual teachers is dance. I get like downloads of like life lessons about life in my dance classes, and I feel like that's what you were getting in your work. You were being taught how to be vulnerable, how to have hard conversations, and then later on that was weaving into your life to make you a better person ultimately.
I love that correlation. I've never thought about it that way, but I think that that is so spot on and accurate. It was like it was a safe space, which is kind of sad too, but like this company that I had helped build, it was like my baby. That was the safe space for me to practice these new things at. Well, at home and with my family, who really should be my safe space, it wasn't because none of us had that skill set. So then all of a sudden I'm learning it here and I'm bringing it home eventually and I'm disrupting everything. I mean, I'm pissing everybody off and I'm, you know, being called out for things and I'm being asked to just get along with people and all of these things that in a healthy relationship, we should be able to say, hey, this makes me feel this way. But we just couldn't do that in our family, and everybody took it so personally and got defensive. And then there was anger and resentment and judgment. So it was just easier not to. But eventually, like I said, I got to that point where I was like, well, can't I can't sacrifice myself anymore to please everybody else. I can't lie to everybody else anymore to try to make them happy. It just got to the point where I was so exhausted. I was so unhappy. I was so unfulfilled that I had to do it.
I think, Christine, that what you know, that unhappiness that you talk about is when you feel like your life is compartmentalized, and you do talk about that in the book when you were talking about how you had learned to compartmentalize everything in your life, right? Like put everything in like a different bucket. And I
Mhm.
think that that is when we feel disingenuous in our lives, when we feel like we're able to be a certain way in a certain area of our life, but we can't integrate that into the other areas, into our personal life. And what ends up happening at the end of the book is that you end up integrating yourself. Like, you know, that Christine that's able to be vulnerable, that's able to have hard, conversations, that's able to take up space and be seen, right? Because that's another thing that you talk
Yes.
about in your work, that you felt at times that you always had to dim your light in order to make other people comfortable. So that was something else that you were learning in your work. And I
Hmm.
think as women, we really we know what you're talking about when you say that we have to sometimes
Yeah.
dim our light, particularly when we're in front of men, because we don't want to be seen as a bitch, or we don't want to be seen as like too egotistical. But then these men get raises and they get promotions because they have this they portray themselves as so loud
Capable.
and so
Yeah.
capable. And we sometimes
Yeah.
in trying to please others, we dim our light because we don't want to be seen as like, oh, I have this huge ego, but that doesn't serve us as well. So you were learning to be seen in a room, to have your light shine in big ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cool thing is, I think the discomfort and where you're like, I can't take this anymore is like, this doesn't feel like it's in the other aspects of our life. And then you started integrating it in
Right.
your personal life.
Mm. Totally. Yeah, I have been on a journey, I realize now, but I didn't know it consciously at the time, to live a life in divine alignment. And that is where I'm at today. And I can feel when something's not aligned. But I was living in this misalignment for most of my life. And so I had to shut down. I'm a very sensitive person and a lot of, not just like emotionally, but physically, spiritually, like I sense a lot. And I had to just dim it all. And I had to dim myself because I could sense when other people would feel threatened by me and things. Again, that's not our responsibility. We shouldn't have to worry about how we show up in the world, how it affects others. We should just show up in the world as ourselves. That's the best gift we can give to the world. But we don't learn that as young, at least I didn't learn that as a young child. I learned it was a lot safer to be smaller and to not ask for my needs or not argue, um, and just be easygoing. And so and like you said, in my company, and as I'm growing the skill set, I'm starting to like strut around the office and be silly and be myself where I never was comfortable doing that before. And then I started integrating it into the other aspects of my life. And that's when, I mean, like everything blew up in my world because I was no longer aligned. I was feeling so uncomfortable in that misalignment. And I was my body was aching to be in that divine alignment. And so I left my husband, I left the company 4 months later, and then I just went into this cocoon and just healed. I cried. I allowed my nervous system to heal. I was in this fight or fight, this high alert system for I don't even know how long, years and years and years. And my body, my adrenals were just broken. And so I went into this cocoon and a lot of my friendships changed. The people who got it, and they showed up for me. And the people who didn't, they didn't. But I was okay with that because I realized that as I was healing, my frequency was changing, like from a vibrational standpoint. I know you know what that means, but like I was raising up and I didn't want to bring myself down to meet people where they were at anymore. And somebody said something to me because I was like, oh, I'm too much. And they're like, girl, they're just not enough for you. And I was like, wow. And that changed everything. No longer was I ever worried about being too much in a room to a guy, around somebody. I was just like, okay, if I'm too much, then they're not enough. And that's okay. That's okay. But that just meant from a vibrational level, I might have been here and they might be somewhere else. And we weren't on that same level. And I was okay letting it go. It was hard. There were lonely times, there were times I was like, I wish I could just be normal, whatever normal is. But normal meant fitting myself into this box that I was so unhappy in for the majority of my life. I wasn't unhappy. I had a happy life. So I don't mean it like that, but just this like unfulfilled, not the depth that I'm now seeking. I just want depth in everything. I want depth with my girlfriends. I want depth with whoever my future partner is. I want depth with the people and the things in my life because that's what really matters.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. Like sometimes we just have to like
Yeah.
allow ourselves for that to be okay. The fact that we want more. And the fact that that
Hmm.
more is not necessarily more, it's not a more material, it's a more like depth
No.
about it. It's like it's something else. It does have to do with spirituality. It does have to do with like going inward. And I want to say
Yes.
kudos to you for, for allowing yourself to go into that cocoon that you talk about because
Mm.
I think, and you mentioned it in the book. Your go to or your feeling immediately when you left your job and when you resign, when you resign as CEO, because and everything happened all at once. It was 2022 for you. Was that year where you just like let it all go, like you let your
Yeah.
marriage go, like
23.
23,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you let your you said basically you close a chapter on your marriage, you close a chapter on the company that you've been working so so hard on and you've given so much love to, and your body sort of wanted to like go into the next, okay, well, let's get another job, let's become CEO of another company, let's
Yeah.
and the fact that you were able to tune in and say, I recognize that this feels uncomfortable, that like
Mm.
not doing that I'm so used to doing feels really uncomfortable, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
sit in this
So hard.
yeah. I'm
It
gonna sit
was so hard.
in comfort. I can't even imagine because as you're describing, I like, yeah, you went from having your life is like one thing back to back to back to back to back activities with your kids, with your job, like everything, right? And then you go to being a single mother who's now splitting the
Hmm.
custody of of her children. So you have the children 50% of the time. That
Yep.
already takes a lot of or gives you a lot of time back, right? Because you're not
Yep.
responsible for the children on those weeks. But then on top of that, for you to resign from your job, which was basically where all your social life was coming from, because
Yes.
you tell us that like all of your social gatherings had to do with work. So when that was stripped away from you as well, you find yourself with the in the opposite
With nothing
area with nothing.
50% of the time. Yeah. It was
And
wild.
wow. I mean,
It was, I mean, I talk about my identity, my whole identity was caught up in this. I'm a co-CEO in this healthcare technology company that I helped build. So there are all of these things that are usually male dominated. Usually it's a man who's the CEO. Usually it's a man who's a founder. Usually when the founder was a man, he was my business partner. I wasn't a founder, but I was a founding employee. So we built the company together. And that's badass. And so from my and like it's like your ego, right? So then I had to learn about ego. I had to learn about how our ego, it can be healthy when it's driven by the soul, but when your ego is actually driving you and you're doing things for that outwardly attention, or because something's unhealthy, you have those core wounds that you haven't healed, so you're doing it to protect yourself. That's a whole, and so I had to like figure out that I actually had this ego. I always thought that I was, I mean, everybody has an ego, but that was hard too because I was this, I had this big job and this big career and I was really successful. And now all of a sudden I wasn't working and I didn't have the meetings, and what was my value and what was my worth? And it's like just being us, we don't learn that that's enough. We don't learn that our value is just in us being us. Like we don't have to prove anything. So that was tough. That's why I was in that cocoon. I was in that cocoon for a while. I didn't talk to really anybody.
It's interesting because what you're talking about is like the stripping away of all the labels that you carried. And these labels, they give
Hmm.
us like a sort of sense of importance, right? But then all of a sudden you're like, okay, the label of wife, that's not there anymore. The
Right.
label of mother is there. Like, of course, you're a mother like all the time, but
All the time, but
but you're no longer, when you don't have your children like all of the time, it makes you feel like, wait a minute, that's a little bit strange. And then now the
hmm
CEO and that label is also taken away from you. Like, who are you? And I think this is a question where, I mean, if the listeners can, sort of ask yourself, like, when I'm not all of these labels, who am I? And where
yeah,
does my worth come from? Am I attaching my worth to the title that I carry in my job, or or the title that somebody gives me as a wife or as a mother? Like, who am I when I'm
okay.
stripped away from all of these labels? And how do I like feel worthiness just by being?
It's it's wild.
Because
And the reality is like you're Val and you're a woman and you're a mother and you're like, but that's not really even who you are, right? Like at the end of the day, like we are just these beautiful souls that are here playing this game of life to learn to evolve. Like our only job in this lifetime, in every lifetime, is to evolve as much as we can, right? Like one of one of my teachers always says, look at the flower. The flower's only job is to be a flower. They're not trying to be a tree. They're not trying to be a squirrel running around. They're just trying to be they're just a flower. Like, why are we always trying to be something else? Like, why can't we just be this beautiful soul that's evolving, that's full of love, and then bringing benefit wherever we can bring benefit, serving others?
yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so deep. I want to go back to what you said about alignment, because I feel like alignment has to do with like getting in touch with our hearts. I think actually one of
Yeah,
your chapters is like heart led something, right? Where you're like getting in touch with your heart. Is that what you ultimately like? Is that what you feel that alignment is like? How do you see alignment? Like, what does that mean to you? Does that mean getting
yeah.
in touch with your heart? Like, what does that mean for you? And like, what did you learn about that for yourself?
So it's a couple things. So alignment to me is it's my head, my heart, and my gut. Those three need, and my will, my guts, my will, like those three need to be in alignment. So if my head and my will is saying like I need to go start this new company and I need to do it right now, but my heart's like, ooh, I don't, that doesn't feel great, then that's not alignment. Whereas before, because my head was telling me to do something, I would just go do it. Like you mentioned the example of when I resigned, my head was like, you need to go get another job and you need to go, you're going to lose credibility and you're going to this, and this. Like, go do it. But it was so out of alignment of what my body was trying to tell me, my heart and my gut, my will. So that's the first aspect of it. And then I think there's a divine alignment that our soul has a purpose for. And so it's aligning with that soul purpose on top of it and aligning with the laws of the universe and and what that means, not only from like a spiritual standpoint, but also from this human experience that we're living as, Christine on this planet at this time. Like, how do I align all of those things? So it's like, what's my soul purpose? Which is hard. Like, your soul's not here. Here's your purpose. Go fulfill it, right? Like, you have to go internal. Like you said, you have to still yourself. You have to quiet yourself. You have to go within, and within has all the answers. And that's where that alignment just really starts to, I mean, I keep doing this, but it's like how I see it, how I feel it in my body. It's like, whoop, it like just lights up. And then when I'm not in alignment with something or someone, oh my gosh, it's like, it's, I feel this discomfort that I used to live in all the time, but I didn't know it was discomfort before, right? Like now I start to feel that and I'm like, oh, wait, that's misaligned.
Yes, it's almost like because a lot of times our body's telling us things. And
Hmm.
that like ickiness, that like, oh, that doesn't feel right. We ignore it so many times, like you say.
All the time,
Oh
all
my,
the time.
and we get so you and then the thing is, when you get so used to that, it becomes your go-to, and then you don't even know what alignment even feels like, because it always feels like you're going against yourself. Like when you
Mm,
say yes to things that you don't want to do because you just want to please others, but you're not pleasing yourself. And there's a line in the
yeah.
book that I love that I think came from another book that you mentioned about how your job in life is to like, I don't know, we disappoint as many people. It doesn't matter as
Mm,
many as it takes to make sure that you don't disappoint yourself. And
yeah. Glennon Doyle.
yeah,
Hmm.
wow. And I was like,
Hmm.
that is so true because our job is should literally be to never disappoint ourselves, to never go against
Totally.
ourselves. Because there were a lot of signs that and we'll talk about a little bit about signs right now, because that was another really cool thing about your book, because you got signs when your body was trying to tell you, Christine, it's too
Yeah.
much. Like you
Ooh,
hair falling off, and like your health having certain things when your body was trying to tell you, like, Christine,
yeah.
this is too much. This is too much.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, so for your listeners, Val's talking about towards like the end of 2019, I got really sick because I was overworking, I was people pleasing, I was going from one thing to the next, thinking that by showing up physically, I was showing up, but mentally I wasn't there. I wasn't actually holding space for people or showing up for people the way they needed. But I thought because I physically was, I was there, but my body was like, no, 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 reject, reject, reject. And so I started slowing down a little bit. And then a new teacher came into my life at that time in 2020, and her name was Davy Blue. And she's taught me about signs because she was so able to just receive downloads. And I was so dense and closed off and heavy because I was living this human experience as this human and not as this spiritual being. And so she's like, just start by asking for signs. And I would ask for a sign. And she said, it has to be time bound and it has to be specific. So, like, ask for a blue butterfly within 48 hours or 2 days or something. And so I would ask for signs and I wouldn't get the signs. So I was like, I can't see signs. And I realized later it was because I wasn't meant to get that confirmation for whatever I was asking for at that time. So one night I was like, oh my gosh, universe, like if I can see signs, like make it big and obvious and just throw it in my face that I can see signs. Like show me a rainbow tomorrow. That's what I asked for. By the end of day tomorrow, show me a rainbow and make it so big and so obvious. In the middle of the night, like my TV downstairs went on by itself. There was no reason for it to go on. I was still, married and my ex was out of town. So I was like, what was that? So I ran down and the TV was blaring and it wasn't like a rainbow per se, but it was fractals of light. And it was just all the colors of the rainbow that were on the TV. And I was like, whoa, that's weird. But it's not a rainbow. It's not a rainbow. It's like, okay. So I turned it off. And then the next day, like got up, I had all this electrical interference all day long. It was wild, like things with my daughter, things with my company. And then all of a sudden I like opened up and I realized there were these rainbows everywhere. Like my daughter's gymnastics leotard had rainbows on. She had some headband on that had rainbows. There was another rainbow thing. Like it was just in my face, like I had asked for. And I was just like, oh my gosh, wow. Like I can't believe I wasn't seeing this, but it was almost like the proof I needed to be able to. And so then it became my kind of my communication with my angels and my guides. I know people who have get those downloads from them pretty regularly. I can't say I like get those downloads all the time. So I'll ask for a sign, like, is this something I'm supposed to do? Show me a sign by this time. And I get the sign or I don't get the sign, but then I have to trust. If I don't get the sign, that's because it wasn't for my highest good. So that was like really when I started to build trust in the universe and spirituality. Because before it was just like I knew God was real, but I didn't really believe in religion because there were things with religion that I just didn't really understand. And that's when when the signs started coming, I was like, okay, I get this. Like what I'm feeling in my body is real. What I'm sensing is real. These signs are real. And it was just this beautiful gift. And it was like taking off that top layer of the onion to get to the next layer. And then you get to the next and then the next and the next.
I love that. I'm a big science person, so I love that part of your book because I'm like, yeah, girl, go get
Yeah. I love that.
and it's funny because I was like, I talk about this like with I talked about it with my dad about signs, and I was telling him, "Oh my God." And I was telling him about the experiences that because I was like the signs were just flooding my life, and I realized the more present I am to every single minute
Yes.
of my life, the more I see the signs everywhere, even without
Yes.
asking for things. If I'm just open, if I open my eyes, but like open my eyes.
Hmm.
We think we have our eyes open and we really are not aware and we're not present. But if I live my moment to moment very aware, I get signs everywhere. From a sign that I'm like I'm driving and there's a sign in the that says something that I need to hear, that I need to like
Hmm.
hear, but I won't, like if I'm aware of it, I'll recognize it. I was like, wow, that was something I really needed. Like the books that will be appropriate for me at the time will show up.
Yep.
I'll get the lessons from just like anywhere. I might be sitting next to somebody and I don't know, it could be, where I'm getting the driver's license for my child and somebody's sitting next to me and all of a sudden we'll start talking and whatever conversation pops up is exactly
Yes.
the person will say exactly what I needed to hear that I didn't even know I needed to hear. And if we open ourselves up to that, life becomes magical because you see the
It's
serendipity
magical.
everywhere.
Yeah. Hmm.
Really cool.
It
So
is so cool. And I like angel numbers. Numbers are a big thing. They'll always pop up for me. I find money all the time. I'll find a little bit of change. I'm like, where'd this, dime plus two pennies come from? And then I'll look up angel number 12. And, it's just like these, like you said, if you're open to it and you allow the magic of it to really resonate with you. I mean, a lot of people are quick to just be like, oh, it's a coincidence or somebody dropped that or, what, like maybe. But I don't believe that. Like, I believe in the serendipity and the magic of it all, and that it is all there for our highest good if we're willing to open and listen to it.
well, I think that's the other transformation that you have throughout the book is you're opening up to like fun, right? And you had mentioned that a couple
Yeah.
times in the book where you're just like, where is the fun, Christine? And as you delve more into like the spiritual world and you get to know yourself more, that aspect of Christine like rises, right? It like
Hmm.
there's way more joy in your life, there's way more fun, and your life becomes so much more meanful. Like
Hmm.
your inner child comes alive again, right?
Yeah. And I still, even with all this work, still have to focus on that because that's not always so natural for me. I laugh so much more. I have so much fun now, but it's like, what else can I do to play? Like you mentioned dance. I need to get out and start dancing again. Like I don't know why I haven't. I've been wanting to go, but why haven't I? And so it's like there's things like that that I know my inner child would just love to have more of that playfulness.
I think it's so common for us to like auto like how do you discipline or auto, and it's not even discipline, auto like punish ourselves, to punish ourselves
Yeah.
like without reason. Like you said, there's these things that you want to do, like you've always thought of an art class or I don't know, it could be anything, right? Something that you wanted to try, maybe a language that you wanted to learn and you put it off and you put it off and you put it off and we
Yeah.
we like keep ourselves from doing those things that our heart has been telling us for years that
Right.
we've wanted to do.
And there's a reason for it because it's our creativity, it's our expression, it's our way to allow that side to come free, which is really what our soul is trying to do. Like we are creation. If we are God and God is creation, then we are creation and we're meant to create. Like this beautiful podcast that you do, like you are creating all the time. You're acting, you're creating, like you are this creative person. But some of us, like, it's harder. It's just not as natural to like put it out there in that way.
Or we need to justify it, like, okay, oh well, I'm not taking, I would love to take art
Yeah,
classes, but I'm not a kid anymore, so why am I taking art? It's like
right,
we have our mind, like you were talking about, rule our world in our mind, and we also always have to have a justification for everything, and it's,
yes,
oh, that's not reasonable, whatever reasonable is, like,
right. Oh,
and then we
story
deprive
of my life.
ourselves. We deprive
Yes,
of those things that bring us so much joy. So yeah,
yeah,
like it's a reminder to stop like depriving ourselves and align with our true
in
desires.
a line. Yes,
Align
I
with our.
love that.
I love it. You guys have to read
Yeah,
her book, Unwinding Perfect. Here it is. Christine, tell us about what's next. I know you're up to new things, so tell us a little bit about like
yeah,
for Christine.
yeah. Thanks. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen after the book came out. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel, which way I would want to go. A couple months after it came out, this was like April of last year, 24. I realized I didn't want to do the author speaker circuit thing, and I was really missing business. So my heart was calling me to work with mostly female entrepreneurs and help them build and scale their businesses that they wanted to become venture backed with. So that was what my expertise was in. I loved doing it. So I founded a company called co-foundHer, and we do boutique advisory and investment. Which has been really cool and it's been really rewarding. But what I realized, and I knew this, but female entrepreneurs founders get about 2% of all venture capital if you're a female only founded company. So there's billions of dollars going out and women are only getting 2%. And it's stayed about 2% forever. If you have a male co-founder, you get about 17% of the capital. So there's this huge opportunity to move money with female founders. And so I decided I was going to raise a fund. And that just means I'm going to get people to invest in the fund, and then we'll take that money and we'll invest it in these companies that are building awesome solutions. Doesn't have to be female founded, but it has to have a female executive or a female who has a significant amount of equity in the company. And then the solution has to be benefiting women in some way. So that's where I'm at right now. I've been working just with some incredible entrepreneurs with great ideas who are building solutions that are changing lives. Everything from like virtual pulmonary rehab, which is super cool, to using AI to drive cycles and for women, like when we should and shouldn't be drinking, when we should and shouldn't be having caffeine, when we should and shouldn't be working out because we're women. And unlike men who are hormonally like flatlined, we do this every 28 days. And it's been so stigmatized. Like, I'm sure you've heard all the things growing up as a woman, and like we just get it, and we're just taught to suppress that we're moody on these certain days. And so, there's a lot of money and effort and thought being put into women now, and because of our cycles and because of our hormones at different stages. So that's been really fun and exciting. So there's a lot of really
Wow.
great stuff going
It's
on.
amazing because I love so one of the coolest things I think about getting to do the podcast is meeting all these female entrepreneurs and seeing how money in the hands of women really does make a difference for the world.
It does.
Truly do
Yeah.
believe that the more money is in the hands of women, the more a lot more money is poured into education and to like what is it? What do they call it when you pay it forward?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something innate in us as women. When we become wealthy, that we want to pay it forward and we want to like reach a hand out. Um,
Totally. All the data shows that too. Women, what we care about is very different than what men care about as far as solutions. And we need both sides. So it's
yeah,
not like we need to swing the pendulum all the way so it's female only. We need just the
absolutely.
balance,
We need a balance.
the
We need a
alignment.
balance. Which you talk about the
Yeah.
book too, which is interesting that you're yin and yang and having to like balance the feminine and masculine energy because so many of us are in masculine overdrive even as women.
Hmm.
And so many of us are so desperately wanting to back in touch with our feminine energy.
Yeah.
And when we do balance the energies within, that's our first, right? Our first homework is to balance the energies within. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, obviously, when we're in partnership with somebody and to have that and those two energies balanced within our
Mm.
lives, that's where the magic happens,
Yeah.
right? It's not about
Absolutely.
having one energy superior to the other or putting one down.
Totally.
It's in the balance and bringing that yin and yang and that where the magic truly is.
Well, and you said the perfect thing. We all have both of them inside of us. So it's like men have feminine energy inside of them and they need to be able to harness it in a healthy way where they can be caring and compassionate and loving and hold space and creative but still be that driver and that hunter and the protector, right? Like there, when that balance comes together, we all win. And I think that that's what's missing the most from our society right now, are men being able to step into that softer side because it's just not allowed. They weren't raised that way and it's not allowed. It's not seen as superior to how they've been programmed for so many
Absolutely.
generations.
What's interesting, however, is that the men that, if we were to think of like the men that we truly admire in our lives, they're the men with the balanced female energy.
Yeah.
Like for example, my dad is um he's a masculine man with in touch with his feminine side. And I think we
Yeah.
all love that about my father. Like, and I think if I were to look at all the other men in my life that I admire, they have that component, the ability to
Totally.
a leader, to be strong, to be the protector, like you said, but also the ability to be to also have that nurturing side and that caring side
Yes.
about them. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. Mamacita, I'm going to put all the links to Christine on the website. If you have any questions also and comments, go to mamasconganaspodcast.com/230, mamasconganaspodcast.com/230. Thanks again, Christine, for being with us today. I love it. I loved sharing your
Okay.
story and like digging deeper into like everything that you've gone through. And thank you, honestly,
Yes.
for having the
Mm.
courage, because I say courage because there are things in the book that you share that aren't easy to share. They're personal. And I think a lot of us sometimes hold back from revealing those things that we might be like ashamed about because
Right.
we're taught not to do so. Like having women like you share their vulnerable stories, I really do think you're a champion for all of us to also have the courage to step into our power and to examine our shadows.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that was the whole purpose why I even published it. My goal was if I could empower one person to step into the life that they desire and deserve, then it was worth it to me. So thank you for letting me share my story today.
Yay! Well, get the book, guys.
Yay.
Unwinding Perfect, and I will see you next time. Besitos. Hey, it's Valentina Azara. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing to our motivational channel. If you have any questions or comments, visit our website at mamasconganaspodcast.com or follow me on social media at Mamas Con Ganas. And remember, don't be a mama con drama. Let's be mamas con ganas.